Yes, hello and welcome to Footy Talk for your Thursday. Daisy Thomas here and joining me, alongside me, and what a joy it is. Usually I look across and I see Heath and I try and look another way. Not today. Kate McCarthy, my favourite, a sweetie, is in studio. Katie, welcome, mate.
Thanks, Days. It's great to be here and even better to be doing this alongside you. I think everyone knows that we have, I don't know what to call it. It's not a bromance. Well, it could be a bromance. It still could be. I'm happy to identify it as a bromance.
Yeah, just one.
Maybe it's just a dead set romance.
Maybe it's just a man's. Like we love working together. We've had a really fun journey starting out pretty much together on the M's and working our way through. So it is always a delight when we get alongside each other. We have a great deal of fun, and hopefully today is no exception. We'll punch right into it. Sydney taking on the Blues tomorrow night. I'm calling it match of the round. It should be an absolute belter.
Has to be match of the round. These two teams sitting really nicely coming into this one. Obviously, the Swans, we know what sort of form they're in. 8 wins and a loss. And then Carlton, they've had the few losses in the recent weeks, but they're putting together some beautiful games. We know that they're the Collingwood of this year, so predictions would say this one's going to go right down to the wire. But yeah, there've been two teams that have been right up there, and I think that will continue to be right up there come September. But one thing I want to ask you, Days, it's the injury list at Carlton. It's growing more and more each week. We've seen Chera go down again with another hammy. The list is just growing. Do you think, one, it's already starting to affect them, or when does it hit them? It's
a massive issue. There's no doubt about that. And we've seen throughout the season this year, past years, when you start to lose a chunk of your best side, which is happening, you can cover for one or two like they were able to do with Walsh at the start of the year, with Chera and Hewitt playing some good football. But just indulge me in this and have a listen. Cottrell now out with Matt Carroll out with a groin, Chera hamstring, Cottrell foot, Cunningham wrist, Doherty knee season, Durden concussion, Fogarty wrist, Motlop hamstring, O'Keefe hamstring, probably not the biggest name, Mark Pitnet finger, Adam Sard hamstring, Silvani knee, and Zach Williams glute. There's 5 to 6 first pick players out of your side. So your depth, and the messaging will be from the Blues that our depth is good enough to cover.
Next man up,
etc., etc. But when that is the philosophy, if they're not as talented, they're just not as talented. So at the moment, they've gotten away with it. They've got a bye coming up in 5 weeks. They will be looking for that like no end. They got Sydney this week, the Suns, Port, and the Bombers. All winnable games, but also, with the form that some of them in, all very losable games as well. What do you think of it all?
Yeah, it's one of those ones where they could be hobbling towards the bye. I mean, a lot of them already are, as we've seen with that list. But yeah, you want to take that form into the bye so that you have the nice week off, consolidate for a week, recover, get back into it. But those players that you've mentioned, some of them are real key pillars in their defence. Yep. So they're small defenders, Sard, Williams. They've been really good in recent times, or in the first sort of few rounds, at defending scores.
Yep.
In the last 4 weeks, they've conceded 93 points, so on average. So that's what's hurt them in their losses. They're conceding too many goals, and I think it is those players that you're starting to see, okay, they don't quite have the defensive stocks in those smalls that they need to defend. And coming up against Sydney, we know how dangerous their smalls are. They're mids that push forward as well. I think that's sort of the area that's going to be really hard for them to defend against Sydney, who have Papley, who have Goulden, who pushes forward. We've seen Heaney hit the scoreboard multiple times. The Chad, we love that. But yeah, I think that's the area that's going to be the weakness.
And there is football fans who go, well, what does it actually mean by, it is a point where it isn't just one man up, one man in. So you take a Sard out of the side, but not only is he a metres gain player, he's probably their best defensive one-on-one back as well, which is an underrated part of his game. So then he goes down, so a Newman has to go and then play a one-on-one role. But Newman, as we know, is one of their better kicks out of the back line. So you start to shuffle your strengths. You're not as predictable up the field. You're not as good at defending scores. And as you said, when they are conceding that amount, it's probably going to lead to losses at some point. We heard Michael Voss speak after the Geelong game pretty openly saying, yes, it might have been a great spectacle. That isn't what we want, and that isn't how we want to play. Another couple of big games over the weekend that we will cast an eye on, and this one, I've got great interest in this. GWS taking on the Western Bulldogs. All things equal, which is one of my favourite sayings, I think the GWS Giants win this because they've got more talent, their list is better. But if the Bulldogs get smacked, the question just becomes the same question we've asked every single week. Hopefully they can be competitive.
Yeah, every week they've sort of put off. They've had a few tough weeks and then they've put off the conversation again, the Bulldogs, by having a good win. We saw it against Richmond. Richmond were, no disrespect, but they were putrid. That was awful.
Horrid.
An awful performance. We know their injury woes as well.
As my man who usually sits there would say, Puopolo.
Puopolo.
They were Puopolo.
Yeah, they were. They really were. But, yeah, I think this one, it evens it up because they've lost Lockie Ash and Kelly out with injury. They've both done their calves. So that... They are two big players, have been huge for the GWS this season. But they're not in the best of form. They've lost 3 of their last 4. Obviously, that close loss to Carlton didn't really turn up against the Swans and faded out like almost in the second half against the Bombers. That was poor. So I think this one is a lot more equal than sort of most punters would think going into it, considering both ladder positions. And I think the Bulldogs are a sneaky chance in this one, depending on who turns up.
Well, that is the question. If you are a footy fan, if you are a Western Bulldogs fan, that would be a great frustration. And no doubt for Luke Beveridge, he'd just be playing that his team comes in the right frame of mind because they are a sneaky chance. At least if they're competitive and maybe lose by 3 kicks in the end, you go, that's a pass mark for this game. That is a reasonable outcome. I love what Sam Darcy is starting to do. A lot of hype coming in, a lot of pressure. He was built like a garfish when he first came into the league, and now he's put some muscle on. He's learned how to use his body. He takes the ball at the highest point. He's someone that will quickly become one of the better big man forwards in the competition. Give it 2 years' time, I think that conversation will be going, is he the best big man in the comp?
Couldn't agree more. And obviously they've got a little bit of a dilemma now, having re-signed Norton for so long. They've got Ugle-Hagan for another 2, and then the development of Darcy, throw that in as well. It's a little bit of a good headache to have, but would they have signed Norton for so long knowing the development was coming from Darcy?
I think Sam Darcy might be the big winner out of all of this.
Agreed.
Because a couple of years' time, the old knock, 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 who's there? Oh, everyone. Where would you like to go? And the other game we will touch on, just quickly, St Kilda taking on Fremantle. Now, I wasn't overly sold on St Kilda last year. I think I actually went on record saying I could see them having 3 or 4 wins for the year, and they started 4-0. So take that for what it is. But I think this year they're sort of just achieving where they are at, where it's understandable as to where they're at as a group. And Fremantle, I think we give them a mulligan for what happened last week in and around the football club with the passing, of course, of next teammate.
100%. I'm all for that one. I think we just scrap that for Freo. Forget it even happened in the sense of the football game, not obviously what happened at the football club. But yeah, to play that game, that was tough. I don't think anyone can take anything out of that performance against Sydney Swans. We look forward to what they're bringing this week and judge them a little bit more on that. But again, it would be a rough week still.
Yeah.
They've still got the funeral to come. It's not going to get much easier for them the next few weeks. So I think football media needs to cut them a little bit of slack. There's been some stuff said over the weekend that they didn't turn up. And, come on, you can't assess a team like that after what they went through last week. So, yeah, on St Kilda, I think they're talking about making a big play for Jacob Wiedering. Apparently, a $12 million offer has been reported.
This is where we're getting to. This is the biggest news story we have.
Reports these days, though, you just feel like a journalist just yells out a number and puts million behind it and says that was the offer.
Should we start a report?
Yes.
What have we got? We got Sam Darcy, who needs a forward, Collingwood. Collingwood have offered Western Bulldogs young gun Sam Darcy a 6-year deal for $14 million.
Yeah, I've heard it as well.
It's astronomical.
On Wiedering, though, do you think it's who they need?
I think it's definitely who they need. The unfortunate thing is, if you go back and read the Sun Herald, or Herald Sun, how old am I? A couple of weeks ago, he came out and said that we are a group that has committed to one another, especially the elder players, to commit to playing to chase the ultimate success. It would be an interesting move to then go and not leave for cash because he's leaving for opportunity, but I think where he is at the minute, where the Blues are at the minute, not even a large lump of cash, I should say, will get him out the door. And everyone sitting listening to this goes, what would you know? You're a sellout. Well, I got kicked out by Bucks, so let's just call it for what it is.
That's it.
Anything else you want to discuss so far?
Who would you target then? If it's Wiedering, and I'm with you, I don't think that's the move. He won't. Well, I would be very surprised if he moved, given what he's gone through at the Carlton Football Club to get to this point. Who's the person you're targeting or the players you're targeting to get that key position player at St Kilda?
I would be targeting, if the Giants start to slide down the ladder in a year or two, Sam Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
He's the best defender in the comp for mine. So therefore, you have to start a list. And if you're doing it, you go, right, who's the best, who's the next best, who's the third best? And I'd be systematically working my way through it with a large amount of cash next to all of their names.
Yep.
And seeing if we can land one of them, because that's what you have to do. You have to pay overs to get these great players out of clubs.
Here's a left of field one. You give Darcy a couple of years. Norton, if he starts to fall out of favour a little bit, do you target him to play him at centre-half back at the Saints?
Wow. That's a big one.
I don't know if he's interested in playing centre-half back. I just think he'd be an elite centre-half back. We've obviously heard all the talk. He's playing very well at the moment in the forward line, but I don't know if there's space for all three of them.
Do you know what, K-Mac? This is why we need to hear more of you in the media, because not only are you across the game in terms of what's happening when you see it live, your ability to think outside the box is first rate, and that is bloody why we have only the best on this show. Hey, stick around. Coming up next, David Rhys-Jones, the former Carlton hardman, 1987 Norm Smith medalist and Carlton premiership player, in studio to discuss a foundation very close to his heart. This is the Footy Talk podcast. Welcome back to Footy Talk for your Thursday. Footy Talk is, of course, your place for the latest news, interviews and analysis from the world of AFL. Kate McCarthy been good enough to stick around. But as I look to my left, walking in is absolute footballing Carlton royalty, David Rhys-Jones. Jonesy, welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, good to be here.
Exciting when we have you in regardless, because not only what you're doing currently, and we'll get to that in the moment in raising awareness in and around some stuff with your son, but also you were an absolute superstar. And when I talk Carlton football with my mum, she gets a little glint in her eye that it makes me kind of uncomfortable. You must be loving the fact that the Blues are flying and the past players are now getting right involved.
Yeah, well, we got back involved, I think it was about 2006. We started getting involved with the Spirit of Carlton. We called a group of us, and then we ended up taking over the past players, and they threw the keys to us. We were making a bit of money, and they weren't making anything. So, so I've been involved with that pretty heavily for quite a while, which has been fantastic. And but, you know, they were on the bottom of the ladder back then, and that's when we got involved. And I actually said then, I reckon I'll stick it out till they win a flag. And for a while there, I'm thinking, God, blimey, I don't think I'm going to be in this. Hey? But it's going to be a long time. But no, they're going very well at the moment, and hopefully get a few back. And yeah, it's looking good.
Now, back to where the career all started. Fascinating to me, the move from South Melbourne up to Sydney, with part of that, I guess, move to relocate the club in a struggling environment. I heard some of your stuff around your first season at Sydney, and it does remind me a lot of my first season at AFLW. So you had no home ground. You were training just in showgrounds or even on the car park at times of the SCG.
Yeah,
and just
there was an oval there, but they used it as a car park.
Yeah,
and a lot of blokes spun their wheels out of there, and
and you'd get sometimes you'd call at sort of 3 when you were knocking off work to find out where exactly you were training, and I just cannot relate more to that. That is exactly how AFLW was started. Yeah. How niche is that, and how unusual is it for you, or was it for you back then, to relocate and then just start a whole new life up in Sydney, basically?
Well, yeah, I think we sold a bit of a pup at the start of it, because the VFL, as it was then, come in and said, look, South Melbourne wasn't going too well, and you're going to be one club in the biggest city in Australia. You know, you get access to, sponsors and everything. We got up there, they didn't want to know us. They did not want to know us. It was a rugby league town, and we got very little help at all. We weren't allowed to train on the SCG. We never trained on there at all, and trained on the car park. But then when there were cricket, because they used to, state cricket was pretty big then, back in those days, and which was good in some ways, because you got to get out with Dennis Lilly and Rod Marsh and a few of those boys when they were up there playing.
Running the town.
And yeah, they enjoyed a drink during the state games too, so we got out with a few of the boys there. But Yeah. So that was a training ground there, but a lot of times we'd have to ring in at 3 o'clock because we worked back in those days, and from our job and find out where we were parking. It'd be a local footy ground, an Army Oval, or you could have been anywhere. And I remember one day we got there and the balls were all flat, so one of the boys had to jump in the car, go to the local servo, and pump them up with the air compressor, and that's how it was. You know, I mean, we just accepted it and part and parcel of it, but a lot more professional these days.
From there, you go to one of the biggest clubs in Carlton, and from there, success everywhere. What was that transition like?
Well, yeah, Carlton was a beast back then, and expectations were massive, and it wouldn't matter if you had, 6 of your best players out. You're expected to win. You pull that Carlton jumper on, you're expected to win week in, week out. Your supporters expected you to win. And if you didn't, there were blokes like John Elliott and Dick Pratt and Ian Collins, and they were hunting around the rooms and looking for scalps to take, so looking for someone to blame. So, yeah, the expectations were very high, and we're lucky enough we got beaten in '86 in the grand final, and lucky enough to win it in '87.
Yeah, and it was the same opponent in both. So the Hawks did you in '86, and then you ended up getting the title back in '87. But the role that you played to win the Norm Smith, we don't see that too much these days, defenders winning Norm Smith. You had the job on Durham.
Yep.
First of all, what sort of prep did you do? When did you find out it was going to be on Durham? And then how did it play out?
How many times did you belt him?
Well, you look at the opposite happening with, playing Hawthorn and getting beaten the year before.
Yep.
I played on Gary Ayres the year before, and he won the Norm Smith medal. So it did reverse itself the next year. But I squared the ledger. I went to Mad Monday after '86, and I was called Normie all bloody day. So go and get us a beer, Normie, and because I played.
Hope they called you that in '87 as well. Then.
No, it eased off. I squared the ledger, so it was all good then.
Dude, what do you make of the current game? Because we do have a little joke about the era that you played and clobbering blokes that's changed a lot. But 25 reports, 11 suspensions.
Only 25.
Only 25. Do you, and it's all evolved, do you enjoy the way the modern game's played?
Yeah, I do. I don't like the way that players don't protect themselves much anymore, and even in sometimes they initiate head contact, and because they get a free kick.
Yeah.
And we were trying to take someone's head off, to be perfectly honest, and we tackled to hurt a player. So therefore, you braced yourself. You knew, and I liken it to boxing, and it's like a boxer walking out poking his head out. And sticking his head out there all the time, it's going to get knocked off. You've got to protect yourself, and it's one of those things where players will get a free kick if they can get a free kick. I know Kemp copped a bit of a barrage last week, but every player does it.
Yep.
Why should he cop it just because it happens towards the end of a game? Every player's doing it. So and why wouldn't you? I went up to Sydney a few years ago when Sydney and Carlton were playing. I remember Matty Cruiser was standing there, and Adam Goods picked the ball up and ran headfirst into Matty Cruiser's shins, and Cruiser's standing there, and he got a free kick for too high because he made head contact. And I'm thinking, this is getting ridiculous. So I start feeling sorry for the umpires because, geez, it must be a terrible game to umpire these days, and the standard of umpiring seems to have lowered, but I just reckon they're making it too hard for the umpires.
With the 25 reports in the modern day game, what do you think your ratio for games played and then suspensions would be?
And how many more would you have been?
Well, what do you think?
To be perfectly honest, I would love to play these days because, the clubs used to send spuds out onto me, and although their objective was to annoy me and get me in fights and wrestle, and you end up, so a lot of those were retaliating anyway. And, I used to warn blokes, they'd be pinching you. I'd say, you keep doing that, I'm going to whack you. And
you're a man of your word.
Exactly.
You did give him a warning.
You've got to tell them,
Talk to us about Prader-Willi Syndrome. You're in here today discussing and raising some awareness around that.
Yeah, my son Cooper has got Prader-Willi Syndrome. It's a very little-known condition. It's it affects the 15th chromosome. So when you're born, your chromosomes are what piece you together, and it's either deletion or partial deletion, which causes Prader-Willi syndrome. And and that affects the hypothalamus in the brain, which is basically a regulator. Regulates your body temperature, regulates your hunger, your thirst, regulates your mood, everything. So theirs is a bit haywire. So and that's why these kids, and that's how they've coined the condition, Prader-Willi Syndrome, and that's how that's the area that they fit into. Where a lot of people have heard of it is, and it used to be called starvation syndrome, because these kids feel genuinely hungry all the time. So and not kids, they're adults as well. Cooper's 20 now, so but he's, we have no food lying around the house. We have our fridge locked with a bike lock. We've got a lock on the pantry, lock on the freezer. It's so no, and we have no food lying around, no fruit bowls or anything, no food at all lying around. And that's to keep him safe, so he doesn't overindulge. And obviously obesity creates a lot of health issues, and so we try and keep a safe environment as possible, and keep his eating sort of. It's all, he has 7 o'clock breakfast, 10 o'clock snack, 12 o'clock lunch, 3 o'clock afternoon snack, and dinner at 5:30, and that's pretty constant.
And how much of a normal life in terms of the Prader-Willi syndrome, obviously talking about things like having to sort of lock your pantry, lock your fridge. Obviously he's an adult now, does his own thing, I would assume, at times. How anxious does that make you to know that he has choices now to make? And what sort of a normal life does he lead with the syndrome that he's experiencing?
Well, he doesn't really, because he's either with us or he's with a carer. So he needs 24/7 monitoring, and it's just to keep him safe and healthy, and keep him from eating too much, and there has been cases of some of these kids who've overindulged and actually, split their stomach because they've, been able to gorge too much, and some have died from it over the years. So it's, it's a pretty unusual condition, but there's a lot of other things. So, his mood swings are if he doesn't get what he wants, it's like probably dealing with a 10-year-old at times as well. So, it's tough, but it's our life. That's our lot in life, and we get on with it. And we try and make as much awareness as we can, and try and raise some funds through the association as well.
Is there research being done to try and combat it? Is there a chance for a cure or more awareness? Where does that? We hear about some of the bigger diseases and whatnot, with all the funds that go towards that. Where does it lay here?
Well, because it's a genetic condition, it's basically you've got to unscramble the egg, because this is what pieces your chromosomes are what piece you together and what make you who you are. And when you haven't got one, or you're missing something, then it affects a lot of areas. And it's a very, very complex condition, but there is research into a lot of areas of it, and trying to help mitigate the hunger and so forth. The hunger seems to be the one that can, hurt these and create obesity and create health issues and so forth. So, there's a lot of other anxiety issues and different things that we have to deal with. But, it's the hunger one that they try and do studies into, and various. Cooper's on Ozempic at the moment, so
is that having some positive effect?
We haven't really seen much.
Okay.
So at times it's hard to tell, and he doesn't relate much to us either. So you're not getting much out of him for various things as well. So it's a difficult one, but we keep trying things, and the association is fantastic.
Yeah, and on the association, so you've launched your campaign, Kicking Goals for PWS. Tell the listeners what can they do to help, and what's the goal behind that as well.
Yeah, well, people can look up my public profile on Facebook, and we have a 15 for 15, which runs over 15 days. You do 15 things for 15 days. The actual first one I did was I thought I'll do some push-ups, and I hadn't done any weights or push-ups or anything for ages. And oh God, it killed me after 15 days, and you got to beat what you did the day before, and I was so sore. It was crazy. But this year we're looking back at 15. And there's a PR company involved too, which I'm not too happy about at the moment, because there's supposed to be highlights, but there's a lot of lowlights in there as well. So, through my football career, various things, and some of the reports and different things that have occurred throughout, but 15 of the highlights of my football
So
career.
15 footy memories in 15 days is the theme for this year. So we might have to jump on board on that Footy Talk. And
do you still have the the fundraising day up at the Harp? I was a part of it last year.
Yeah, no, we did. And that was fantastic. And what I've found doing all this, and you guys helping out last year, and I actually interviewed blokes I'd actually been to the tribunal with, either them whacking me or and interviewing them and doing various things. And the football community is fantastic for things like that, for people just coming and helping. So it's been terrific. No, that one sort of was a one-off, but that a few guys organised. But we had a golf day earlier this year, which has helped out a little bit. But every little bit helps. It helps the families. A lot of the families, really have. It's hard to get away.
Yeah.
It's hard to just go and do things. I'll be going away in a few weeks' time. We're away for 5 days, and it's an absolute nightmare trying to get the right care and people be able to be available just for 5 days being away. So, it's little things like that we need help with. And, over the time, the association's been fantastic and created a few events. These kids, Prader-Willi kids, really get on pretty well together. They know the other's problems.
Yeah.
It's good for them to be able to relate to someone who can relate to them. And it's even hard for me to understand after 20 years how he actually feels all the time and what's going through his mind, because he can have a meltdown in seconds, and what's going on, what happened, what triggered this. So anything can happen.
You do have a donation link?
Yep. Yeah, the 15 for 15. So if you can Google 15 for 15, I think it's .com.au. And we've also got a raffle running this year as part of it. And so people who donate will, I think it's $15 a ticket, and can win a luxury trip to Bali. So
nice.
which is fantastic.
We'll take care of footy trip for this year.
Yeah.
So enter in that one.
So up to 6 people. So it won't be a footy trip.
That's right. I don't really have many more than 6 friends at the footy club, so that's fine.
No, that is brilliant. We'll make sure that we get the link up at the Footy Talk pod Instagram as well. Thanks so much for coming in, mate. Doing some amazing things, raising some awareness about something that a lot of us don't really know about. So well done to you, and thanks for having a chat on Footy Talk.
No, thanks very much, and giving me the opportunity, because it's important to get things out there and people make, the awareness is as much important as the dollars that come in. Thanks,
if you are in a position to donate, head across to the Footy Talk podcast at Footy Talk _pod on the Instagram. Hit the link, make a donation, and make some change today. That has been it for the big Thursday edition. Abby and Jay will be back on Monday to unpack all the action from the weekend. If you're listening on Spotify, hit the bell and be notified when we drop a new episode. Kate, thank you.
Thanks, Daisy.
Reese, thank you.
Thanks.
I've been Daisy Thomas. You've been all right. See you next week.